Okay, so thanks for those who are joining us. We're getting started a little bit later, but that's because we had such a wonderful time singing songs and praying and hearing from God this morning. So we're excited to get started. As I'm going to go into this little third phase of this teaching. We're looking at about making a change and how we do that. Today we're going to look at the life of someone in the Old Testament who is a great example of believing God, trusting God, and then seeing a great change happen in their lives, and then how that really set up a lot that went forward beyond his life. So we're going to look at the life of Abraham, and I already mentioned this morning, but I'm going to say it while we have it recording, and also for anyone who's joining live, that this is not in any way an exhaustive look at Abraham. I think that would take a really long time to go into Abraham's life and everything. And there have been some really fabulous biblical scholars who have put together information and works about the life of Abraham. And I would encourage you to look at that if you're really interested in understanding, a really full depth of the life of Abraham and what it all encompassed. But we're going to look at a little bit about his life, and we'll go until about 11:30, and if we're where we need to be, great. And if not, we'll stop and pick it up the next time I have opportunity to share. But we are going to go. And so we did have for this year, we have some maps here to look at, help us, because I was talking about, as I was reading through this and studying, there's certain names of places that you need to be reminded of where we are. But we're kind of beginning in the area, if you look on your map, to the far right side where it says Ur of the Chaldeans. This is where we're kind of beginning our reading about Abraham, and you'll see it's right along the Euphrates River. So we're in the Middle Eastern part of the world, right, down near the Persian Gulf. So we are all kind of familiar with those areas, and today, like Iraq, Iran, and a lot of that area in the world. But you would notice that these civilizations a lot of times were being built around these bodies of water because they needed them for to have water and to grow crops. So this Ur is right along the Euphrates River there. Now this is taking place, as we're going to begin looking around chapter 11 in Genesis. So if you want to turn there, we'll get ready to get started. This is taking place after, of course, Noah and the flood and everything happening with all of that, and then Noah and his children, his sons, surviving through as they trusted God and listened to God and come on the other side. Whereas Noah trusted and listened to God, and his children were beneficiaries of his believing. But that they went out and begat a lot of people, right? If you go start reading, there's begatting a lot in there. And we're going to kind of follow the line of Shem, Noah's son Shem, which is where we're going to lead up to where Abraham comes. But so we're beyond that a little bit, and we're just beyond the story of the Tower of Babel, and the people kind of getting together, wanting to build this big tower into the heavens to kind of be like God, and they are all eventually separated out into different areas of the world, and their languages are changed up, so they can't kind of conspire together really any longer to kind of go against God. So we get the separation within the world and the languages of the world, and then we jump from that story into chapter 11 and the story of Abraham. After we get through this big lineage of people, we kind of jump into this idea. So this is after that. We'll kind of begin here in 11, and we're going to, again, kind of in our map area, we're down here around the Euphrates River in this area of Ur. And it says in there, we're going to go down to verses 26 through 32 to start here in chapter 11. So we're not going to read through all of the different, there's a whole bunch of people in this opening part of chapter 11, so we know where people come from. And one thing the Bible, especially the Old Testament, does a really nice job of is lineages, right? We get tons and tons of genealogy and lineages, and even historical scholars who may not always, look at the Bible with the spiritual nature, which we should. They talk about how there's such great historical record, of these genealogies of these people, especially the different kings of the Old Testament and stuff there as well. So we're going to jump down to around verse 26 to get us to where we want to get into the look at the beginning of Abram in his life. So it says in verse 26, it says, "And Terah lived 70 years and begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran." Right? Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begot Abram. Nahor and Haran begot Lot, and Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. So that's where we are, in Ur. Now this is a significant thing in that Lot's father dies because then Lot is kind of taken in by Abram, his uncle, right? Because his father is passed on, and so he's kind of taken in by another male relative, and we know if you read through more that Lot and Abram are going to have this kind of connection that really goes through several parts of Genesis and through Abram's life. And it says, and Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, and the daughter of Haran, and the father of Milcah, and the father of Ishka. And Sarai was barren. She had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there. So if you look on your map real quick, you'll see that we're traveling up across the Euphrates River, kind of north and a little bit west, a little northwest, up into this area known as Haran, right here, kind of working our way towards the land of Canaan, right? And we know of Canaan if we go back into the stories before, and the promised land, right, in these areas. And this is kind of down, if you go a little south of there, where Jerusalem and all of that would be. But we're leaving Ur and traveling kind of north and a little bit west up to Haran. And this is where Abram's father has taken him and his nephew Lot and his wife, and they've moved their family up into this area of Haran. And it says, in the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So Abram's father lives 205 years and then dies while they are in Haran, in this area. So we go to chapter 12. Now the Lord, and here we go, right after the death of Abram's father, in chapter 12, we kind of jump in. Now, in English, when we teach about literature, we talk about compressing time and how sometimes you may jump from one section of a book to the very next section, from a chapter to another chapter, and lots of time may pass, right? We're not going necessarily like the next day. So here we're kind of jumping into chapter 12, and we do have some time that has passed from the time they've traveled to Haran and the time that Abram's father has died, because we know, as we'll look here, that Abram is actually kind of much older already at this point in the story. So we are kind of jumping in. We could figure it out if you really take some time and do the math backwards to figure out how much time we have between here. But we do have some time a little bit after the death of Abram's father. So here in chapter 12, it opens up and it says, Now the Lord God had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. So he's telling him you're going to leave Haran. You're going to get out of this land of your father, and you're going to take your family and your things. You're going to go to this place I'm going to tell you about, that I'm going to prepare for you. Right? In verse 2, And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee, and thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So we know he's at least 75 when they're leaving the land of Haran. Now, this is a kind of a big thing because he's been there, he's lived there, his father had moved them there, he kind of grew up there and had made a life there. And then he gets this revelation from God. God speaks to him and says, you need to leave. You leave all this behind, your father's land, and you need to go where I tell you to go. So that in and of itself takes a lot of trust and believing. Right? And it also shows, I think, that God is speaking to Abraham, that he has this connection to God. God is a person. He's listening to God. He hears God, and he trusts God and believes God, and he goes to what God says. He leaves this land behind. That is the thing he knows, right, as his land. It's like as if, God was like, okay, Joey, you're going to take all your kids and all your family, you're going to leave Garner, and you're going to go somewhere that I want you to go. And then we're like, yeah, but God, I've been here for, 20-some years now, and I have a job here, and I have lots of friends here, a lot of established kind of things here, and I know things here, and but I got to go, right? He's going to want you to go. And so Abram has to really be believing and trusting God to do this. to leave with all, take all his family and everybody and leave Haran at this time. And it says that with that, he says, you're going to leave, and then I'm going to make you a great nation, right? I will make of you a great nation. And it says in there after that, that all families of the earth will be blessed, right? And so when he does this, he follows God and he believes that he will be blessed. The people that are with him, that trust and help him, will be blessed, right? He will protect him against those kind of curse against him. He said, and I will not only bless you and make you a great nation, but I will bless all the families of the world, as well. So he jumped down to 5. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance, all the things they owned, all their cattle and all their sheep and all their goats and whatever else they had, and all the things they had, and they left, right? And they had gathered in the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem. So if you look here, now in the Bible here, it's spelled Sichem, and you'll see the little more modern spelling there of Shechem there. But that's kind of going now down towards the Mediterranean Sea in this land of Canaan, and it's kind of closer to Jerusalem, so a little north of Jerusalem. So that's where they're now going as they leave Haran down to this land of Shechem, unto the plain of Moreh. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel. So you can see there's Bethel. So he goes to a mountain on the east of Bethel. And he pitched his tent, and having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east, and there he built an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south, and there was a famine in the land. So they get there, they get set up there, and then there's a great famine that's happening. And we know a famine means there's a lack of food and water, or drought's water, famine's food, right? And all that's going on there. And so this big famine's happening. Right, and so in verse 10, and there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. So he goes now towards Egypt. So if you look, Egypt's a little further down. It's not on this map part here, but you go down past that Nile area, and you go down, and Egypt is actually in the northeastern part of Africa. So he has to kind of come out of what we know today. It's kind of like that Middle Eastern part there of Asia, and he moves into that northern part of Africa where Egypt is. Now, Egypt a lot of times is connected in with the Middle East because it's very similar cultural, but it's really in Africa where it's located. So he goes there and he sojourns there, and that means he goes and spends some time there in Egypt because of this famine that's going on, right? So therefore it says, and he goes and he sojourns in Egypt, therefore the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass that when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. She's very beautiful, right? Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee. So Abram is kind of nervous about going into Egypt with his beautiful wife he has, that they would get rid of him to get to her. That if they knew they were married, that they would try to kill him, then they'd take his wife. And so he's kind of come up with this plan. Now, there's nothing here that says God told him to do this, right? This is kind of, I think, Abram, he hasn't become Abraham yet, right? His thinking there to kind of nervousness about going into Egypt and kind of protecting himself from being killed and protecting his wife from being taken by the Egyptians. And so he says, just tell him you're my sister. When we go there, you can just tell him you're my sister and you're not my wife. It says, and it came to pass that when Abram was coming to Egypt, the Egyptian beheld the woman that was very fair. I think I skipped it. 13. 13 said, Say, I pray thee that thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And then 14, and it came to pass that when Abram was come to Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman that was very fair. And the princes also of Pharaoh saw her and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. So now it's like they say, well, it's just his sister, so they take her anyway into the house of Pharaoh because they're not worried about taking another man's wife at this point because they said, it's my sister, right? And so into the house, and he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and his asses and manservants and maidservants and his she asses and camels. So Abram gets all this stuff for Sarai because the Pharaoh believes, and the people believe it's his sister, and so they're like going to pay him to have her taken into the house of the Pharaoh. So he gets all this like stuff for her, like the dowry, as they would say, kind of thing. He gets all this stuff given to him, for Sarai. But it is his wife, right? And in 17 it says, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that thou hast done to me? Right? And he says, why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, she is my sister, so that I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore behold thy wife, and take her and go thy way. So all of a sudden, the Pharaoh starts getting these plagues upon him, because of what's happened, taking Abram's wife. And the Pharaoh's like, why didn't you just tell me what was going on? Like, why have you brought all this down upon me? I thought it was your sister, and I took her, and now they think, like, just take her and get out of here, right? Go away, get out of here. And he go that way, and the Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. So when Abram leaves, Moses was in Egypt too, but when Abram leaves Egypt with Sarai, and they head back out of there, back to their own, now not only is he and his wife leaving there, but now they have all this stuff they've accrued there from the Pharaoh to take back with them. So there's this like great blessing that he has to go back, to where he was with all these things that he's received. So then in 13, it says, and Abram went up out of Egypt, and he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, and silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Hai. So he's gone back to the place where he had built the altar, where he had been staying there. You can kind of follow it there back to Bethel on the map. Unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at the first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled there in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. So there's a little, discord that erupts, because Lot has a lot of possessions and things, and Abram has now a lot of possessions and things. They're great, very rich in all these things, right? And then there's some discord kind of happening, some disagreements about can the land where they are sustain all that's there, and there's some disagreements that are kind of popping up. And so Abram approaches Lot and says, look, we don't want to have any issues and problems. We are brethren. Let's kind of figure this out. So we'll see what Abram does. It's a very gracious act. He says, in number 9, it says, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. So he says basically to Lot, here, this is everything we have. He's been blessed by God to have this land here. They've gone here as God told him. He said, this is all the land we have. So pick what you want. And what a gracious thing, Abram does. He allows Lot, his nephew, right, the younger one, the one he's kind of been watching out for from his brother who had passed, and he lets him pick. Take whatever you want. If you go left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. You pick where you want to go, and there you go and establish your area, then I'll take what's left, and I'll go and establish myself over here. So really it's a gracious kind of act that Abram does. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that is, it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves, the one from the other. So Lot looks at it and says, well, that area is really lush and green and plenty of water, and it looks really, really great. So Lot is taking the land that he thinks is the best. And he said, I'll go over there then. And instead of Abram being like, well, no, I thought you would take the other part, and get me that part. I thought you'd be a little more understanding and respectful of these. He's like, okay, there we go. And Lot goes, and he establishes, himself over in this area. And then Abram goes and the other way. In 12, it says, Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. And then we're going to go past this section. You can keep reading there about more information about Sodom and stuff. We're going to jump to a different part of Abram's life, because this goes into a big section about Lot's life there, why he's in this area that he chooses. And it doesn't go well for Lot. Let's just say that. The area he chooses and he goes to be in, things don't go so well for him. He gets in a place that ends up being kind of a rough area, and a lot of some negativity emerges there, and he has to have some help to kind of save himself and his family because of this place he's chosen to go to. So we'll jump over to 14 and go from there. Well, actually, let's see. Yeah, actually, I do want to read this before we go. 14, in verse 14 first. So in 13, verse 14, so real quick, just about this part about him. It says, in 14, it says, so Sodom, he goes to the land of Sodom, he's wicked with the sinners before the Lord exceedingly. So he ends up in a place that's not so great, and he has to deal with a lot of wickedness that happens there. So he picks this area that he thinks is wonderful, ends up being kind of a wicked place. But in verse 14 it says, and the Lord said to Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. In 16, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. And that blew me away when I read that first, because here Abram has been very gracious to Lot, allow Lot to pick what he wanted. Lot looked out, and Lot has chosen what he sees, what his eyes tell him is the best and the place to go. And he ends up in a place of wickedness, right? And he ends up in a place that's not great, and it does not bless his life at all once he ends up there. Abram has trusted God this time, believed in God. He's allowed Lot to do this. He's not argued about it. And then when it's all said and done, God said, look what is left here. This is all of yours. I will bless you with all of this. And you will be, your nation will be numbered as if the dust of the earth. If you could count the particles of the dust of the earth, that is what your nation will be. That is what your legacy will be, is as if the dust of the earth. And that blew me away, thinking about the idea of how much that is, to be able to count every particle of dust of the earth, and how blessed Abram is because he listens and trusts God and believes God. And we see that great distinction there between Lot trusting what he sees and what he thinks is the best versus Abram trusting God and how he is blessed. And it finishes there in 17. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. And then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt on the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. So here we see just, again, this exceeding blessing that Abram receives because he's trusting God and listening to God. All right, so in chapter 14, we're going to look here, and there's this has many things happen in the Old Testament. There's some war that goes on and some things that happen there. So we'll kind of work through this a little bit quickly, because really one major point I wanted to point out of this section. But it says there, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. And all these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emmons in Sheva, Kiriathaim. Now that's it. We're going to jump down from there. Just to establish, there's fighting going on, right? There's just like 12 years of war, and then people start turning against each other and rebelling against each other, and all these different names. And as you keep reading, there's more and more names, and more people doing things bad towards each other, turning on each other. But if we go down towards the bottom, and we see beginning around, let's see, where was it? Yeah, around 14. 13. It says in 13, it said, and there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. So what's happened in this time of fighting, remember, Lot's gone off to this land, And right away, some of the wickedness is that he's dealt with war. War rages because he's picked this area that is like really, really sought after. It's by the water and it's really lush and people want it. So now Lot's dealing with all this war going on in the land and the region he lives in. And in this time, when all these names of people we just read it there are going on and rebellions are occurring, Lot gets taken prisoner. He gets taken captive. Right? And someone escapes the area to come and tell Abram that his nephew's been taken captive. And Abram, stands up and takes all his farm hands and all the people that he has around there. These are not trained warrior soldiers, right? He's all these people with him. He said, we're going to go get my nephew. We're going to go, and get him back, right? And they're going up against trained soldiers and these kings that have these massive, amounts of things at their will and can do what they want to. But Abram and all his farm hands and all his people, his servants and stuff that are there, they go out, to go get Lot back. And it says, so he heard this. He armed his trained servants born in his own house, 318. So 318 servants go with Abram to go to find Lot. And Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. Bless you. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So he takes these 300 some servants, he goes in there, and he defeats the soldiers of the king here, and not only does he get Lot out, but he also gets the women out, and he gets all these other things, all these other spoils, of what he's done, and he brings all that back, right, and from this place. And in 17 it says, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram, the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. Now, you can do a whole bunch of study about Melchizedek as well, and he is the king, but he's also the high priest of God, and he is kind of showing that even though we have this time between Noah and then up here to Abram, that people were still serving God. People were still trusting and serving God. Melchizedek's an example there of someone who is connected to God, the one true God, and he sees Abram and he says, he knows that Abram is listening to the one true God as well. And he says, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. So Melchizedek recognizes, in Abram that he is serving the one true God. And there's a lot you can learn too about Melchizedek and much about how we go into the future later on and all the lineages leading up to the Christ line, how that all plays a role in there as well. And then in 21 it says, And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread, even in a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. This is another great example of Abram's trusting and believing in God, is that the king of Sodom says, here, take all this stuff, leave the people here, but I'll give you all this other stuff, you take it, and go. And Abram's like, I'm taking nothing from you, nothing at all, because I'm not giving you the opportunity to say that you made me who I am, that you are the one who gave me my riches and wealth, that you did this for me. That he only serves the one true God, and all his blessings have come from God. And this is an interesting thing I was thinking about when we had looked at some months ago. We were talking about the kings in the Old Testament and kind of how they would make these mistakes and how they would trust God, but they would do different things. And we talked about different ones in there. And one of the ones we had looked at, I talked about how once he got into quote unquote into bed with the kings of these other regions and then started taking things from them, then he lost his ability to do what he needed to do, because he wasn't now trusting and believing in God to be his sufficiency in those things. He was taking things from others, and then he lost some of that power and control, because then he became connected. I think it was to at the time it was the king of Ethiopia. I think he was taking the stuff from the king of Ethiopia, and then all of a sudden now he's beholden to him. Well, Abram doesn't do that. Abram's like, I don't need anything from you. I don't take anything from you except for the food that they've eaten, and then we're out of here because I'm not giving you any honor, glory at all about what has made me who I am. Right, so it's a really great example there, again, of his believing and trusting in God. He believes and trusts God that he can take these 300 servants and they can go and they can defeat these soldiers and they can get Lot out. And he's not only blessed with Lot being freed, but he's blessed with all these other things, just like he was blessed with all this extra stuff from Egypt when he came out of there. And now he's also blessed with this stuff coming out of saving his nephew. And then he continues to stand for God. He's not bribed or not tricked or not, enamored by the things of this king is offering him. And he goes. And remember, Abram's not a king, right? He's just a guy out there living, but he's getting blessed so abundantly by God. And he's already been told one time, that he will have nations that would, be greater than even the dust of the world. And there's another example he gives that blew me away as well about that coming up. All right, so we'll go to 15 real quick. We're going to look at just the first part of 15 here, and it says in verse 1, After these things the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir. So Abram is asking, what's going to happen? Abram's getting older, right? And he has no children. He has no heir, to kind of take over the family, business, so to speak, kind of thing. And in verse 4 it says, And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. It means you're going to have a son. I'm going to bless you with a son who will be your heir, right? And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. So there's the next example that blew me away when I was reading through this, is that Abram is now thinking in his 5 senses, hey, I'm getting older, I'm going to be gone one day. What is all that I have going to, who's it going to go to? I don't have a child. My wife, Sarai, has been barren, no children. I was like, the only one I have is this servant within my house. Would they take over, I guess, when I'm gone? And God says, no, you will have an heir that I will bless you with from your own loins, you will have a child. And he says, if you'll trust me, look and listen. He takes him outside and he says, look into the sky. And he looks up and he sees all the stars, right? And we sang this morning, it took a miracle to put the stars in place, right? So he looks up into the sky and he sees all these stars out there. And God says, now, if you can number the stars, then you'll know how great your nation will be, like what will come forth from you, right? What will be that? He says, so he's already told him one time, if you can number the dust particles of the earth, and now he says, if you can number the stars, right? He says, look toward the heaven and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said to him, so shall thy seed be. He's worried about having an heir. I just need one kid. And God said, you're going to be, again, the father of nations. Greater than the dust particles of the earth, greater than the number of stars in the heaven. Right? And that's just the ones he could see. Now, you have to imagine how many he couldn't see that are even greater than that, right? And he says, and he did what? In verse 6, he believed. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, take me and heifer. And this is the part where I was going to talk about. There's a whole thing God says, do this. Get a heifer and get this and get this and get this and do all these things. And then I'll show you. It's very similar to stories like if you read about Gideon and Elijah and different ones that they would ask for these signs, and God would say, well, do this. And then he would show them, that he was, faithful, to his word. So we're not going to read all the different things he has to go and do. So real quick, to finish up, I think for today, let's look at 16. All right, So in 16, and we're going to start a little bit part of this, and we'll finish this this part of the story and some extra part later on, because we're going to get into the part here now about wanting an heir and having a son. Eventually it will be Isaac and so on, but there's some things that happen before that. So we're going to just introduce a little bit here, and then we'll finish it up a little bit later. But here in chapter 16 it says, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. And she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai." So he's just come out of chapter 15 talking to God, and God said, don't worry, you're going to have a child. It's going to be your child. It's going to come from your loins. And remember, you're going to be the father of nations, greater than even the number of stars in the heavens, right? And then he goes to this whole rigmarole to kind of prove this to Abram, right? And Abram's believing. But then we roll in here, and here's Abram's wife Sarai's like, hey, I'm old. I haven't had any children. You need to have an heir. And he's like, I have a handmaid. Go to my handmaid and take her and get her pregnant, and she can give you a son, and then you'll have an heir. And just like we said before, even though Abraham has done such a great job of trusting and believing God, he's just talked to God. God's just told him, do this. And then he goes to his wife. His wife's like, look, I'm not going to have any kids. Go have, impregnate my servant here, and then that way we'll have a child. And who does he hearken to? Does he hearken to God and what he's just gone through the whole thing with God, or does he hearken to his wife? He listens to his wife, and he goes and he lays with the handmaid, and she does end up getting pregnant. Right? So you're thinking, Abram, he's still not Abraham yet. Abram, you just had this whole big thing. You just went out, right? Trusted God, number one, to leave your homeland to come here. You trusted God when you went into Egypt. You came out of there okay. You trusted God when Lot got taken, and you took your farm hands and you went there and you fought and you defeated, these soldiers, and you got out Lot and more. You got blessed even more, right? You trusted God when you and Lot had this disagreement. You let him take all the lush land and all the fertile land and everything, and you went over here instead. You listened to God. He's told you he's going to make you a father of nations, even greater than the dust of the earth and even greater than the stars in the sky. And then the first time you got to come across this thing with your wife, you're like, okay, honey, I'll do what you said, right? And so it's a very interesting kind of story, which we'll go into our next time. We'll look at more about that. But it's very interesting that, again, when we talked about making change in our lives, when we talk about believing, even these great examples in the Bible of believing. Noah is a great example of believing and trusting in God. Abraham's a great example, one of the greatest examples of believing and trusting in God. When we talk in the New Testament, Paul's a great example of believing and trusting, in what he should do. Even we look at all of them, they were still men, right? And they were still five senses, and they still had all these things that they would listen, and God would tell them these different things, right? And then they would still a lot of times trust themselves or trust someone else or put faith in someone else, instead of just trusting God. But the good thing about it, as you look at their lives and what they did, they would come back to God too. They would come back and listen, just like we talked about in how we need to renew our minds to the Word and renew our mind to what God tells us, renew our minds on a daily basis to believing and trusting in God. And remember, that's what faith is, that right way of believing. To believing and trusting in God, to putting on His Word in our hearts and our minds, to remind us in those times when we tend to maybe look somewhere else for guidance and look somewhere else, away from maybe what God's been saying, because we want to kind of figure it out on our own, or we want to put some trust in somebody else, that it's going to happen. Even to someone like Abram, who's just had these great things occur, even greater than anything I've ever witnessed really in my life, that I've gone through, and just had God telling him, how He's going to bless his life and bless his, him going as the create happiness among the families of the world, right, and all these things, and even he couldn't always, do the right thing, and didn't always trust the right way, and didn't always believe completely and fully. And so we'll see in our next time a little bit how this plays out leading up to the birth of his son Isaac. But also we're going to see in this story about Sarai and Hagar, the maidservant, and then the son she has with Abram named Ishmael. And we're going to see not only this take place, but some even another great examples of the grace and mercy of God in the life of Hagar and Ishmael as well, and what happens with them. And so we'll wait and do that the next time. So we'll see more about that when I get another chance to teach, and we'll talk more about what leads up to the birth of Isaac, and then some of the things that are blessed because God chooses to make this his covenant with Isaac, who's the son of Abram. Okay? Thank you, God, so much for this great opportunity just again to be reminded about these wonderful examples of men of believing in your word, the stories of men like Abram and his willingness to walk forth out into the world and trusting what you told him, to go into these just really challenging situations with just no knowledge of what to expect, and these unknown occurrences, and not knowing what trials were to come from it, and not knowing what difficulties would come, but just to put believing in his trust in you, and to know that as long as he did that, he was blessed beyond anything he could imagine, so abundantly blessed. Even as you said, to have nations greater than the number of stars in the sky or the particles of dust in the land, and we just are so reminded that in our own lives, if we just put in that little bit of faith and trust and believing in you and your word, and we continue to renew our mind to it and to walk forth upon it, that we will be exceedingly and abundantly blessed beyond what we could ever imagine in this life as well. And also, just again, the reminder that we have even a greater thing in our lives as we have just the salvation brought by your Son Jesus Christ, death and the resurrection. From that we have that now available to us, even greater than these examples we see in the Old Testament of men who believed you and walked forth into these challenging situations, and how they were blessed. So we just thank you for that reminder. We thank you for the things we can learn from this and we can apply in our daily lives, just to be just better believers and doers of your word, so that we can just be able to have all those great and precious promises come to pass in our lives that are there for us to take part of. So we thank you for this, and we thank you again for your Son, Jesus Christ. And we thank you for the many blessings we have in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.